It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in the Vosges Mountains of eastern France. The kind of afternoon where nothing happens, where kids play outside and fathers are still at work and dinner is being thought about. Christine Villman was home with her 4-year-old son Gregory when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, unhurried, almost pleased with itself. "Your son is in my hands." She looked around. He had been right there. Before nightfall, they pulled Gregory from the Valone River, face down, hands and feet bound with cord, still wearing the yellow tracksuit he had put on that morning, the same one he would have worn to dinner if tonight had been a normal night. He was 4 years old. What makes this case different from every cold case you have ever heard is not the murder itself. It is everything that surrounded it. Because that phone call was not a surprise. This family had been living under threat for years. Anonymous letters, anonymous calls, always from the same unseen hand. A figure the Villmans had quietly given a name to. Le Corbeau, the Crow. In 40 years, the Crow has never been found. To understand what happened to Gregory, you have to go back to the late 1970s, years before he was even born, when the first calls started coming in. Whoever was on the other end knew this family in a way that a stranger simply could not. They knew names, addresses, routines, the kind of small specific details that only someone embedded in the fabric of their lives would ever have access to. And what they did with that knowledge was not friendly. The letters that followed were vicious, full of jealousy, full of threat, full of the particular hatred of someone who has watched you up close and decided you deserve to suffer for it. The calls spread outward too, reaching aunts, cousins, the extended Villman network, as if whoever was sending them wanted the entire family to feel it. They reported it to the police. The police did almost nothing. So the calls kept coming, year after year, and the family learned to live with the weight of an enemy they could not see. On the morning of October 16, 1984, someone sat down and wrote a letter. They sealed it, posted it, and went about their day. The letter was addressed to Jean-Marie Villman at his factory, and it said, "I hope you die of grief, boss. Your son is dead." That letter was mailed before Gregory was killed. It arrived at 5:15 in the afternoon. The body was found in the river shortly after. The Crow had not acted in a rage. There was no impulse here, no moment where something snapped. This was planned, scheduled, with the letter sent ahead as a kind of announcement. Whoever did this had been patient for years, and when they finally moved, they moved with precision. What followed was one of the most chaotic criminal investigations in French history. The country was gripped, front pages for months. The pressure on investigators was immense, and pressure like that has a way of making people reach for the nearest available answer. The nearest available answer was Bernard Laroche. Laroche was not a stranger. He was a cousin by marriage, part of the extended world the Villmans moved through, someone who had been close enough and present enough to know the things that the Crow seemed to know. Handwriting analysis tied him to some of the letters. He was arrested in November 1984, and then a witness came forward. Her name was Muriel Ball. She was 15 years old and she was Laroche's sister-in-law, and she told investigators that on the afternoon Gregory died, she had been in the car when Laroche collected the boy from school. She put him there. She said it directly and on the record. Bernard Laroche was formally charged. And then Muriel Ball took it all back. She said she had been pressured, that the statement was false, that she had made it under duress and none of it was true. Laroche was innocent. She had been wrong. He was released. Jean-Marie Villman, a father who had buried his son and watched the man he believed responsible walk free, could not live inside that outcome. On March 29, 1985, he waited outside Bernard Laroche's home with a hunting rifle and shot him dead in front of his house. He was convicted of murder and served 4 years. Whether Laroche had anything to do with Gregory's death was never established either way. But the case had one more thing left to do to this family. In July 1985, the investigating judge, a man named Jean-Michel Lambert, whose handling of this case would later become infamous in its own right, charged Christine Villman with the murder of her own son. The evidence against her was not evidence in the way most people would understand the word. It was built largely on the idea that she had seemed too composed in the aftermath, that her grief had not looked like grief was supposed to look, that something about the way she carried herself struck certain people as wrong. She was dragged through years of accusation, years of public scrutiny, tried and retried in the press while the actual killer remained completely untouched. The charges were dropped in 1993. She was never convicted of anything. In 2017, 33 years after a 4-year-old boy was pulled from a river, investigators announced new arrests. DNA technology had come far enough to go back to the evidence, and 2 elderly women, relatives of the Vilman family, were brought in for questioning. One was briefly charged. The charges were dropped. The case remains officially unsolved. The crow was never identified. Not the letter writer who spent years mapping a family's life from the inside. Not the person who mailed proof of a murder before the murder had even happened. Not whoever tied the wrists and ankles of a 4-year-old boy and put him in that river and then went home. All of them walked away. Gregory Vilman would be 44 years old today. This case barely registers in the English-speaking world. But in France it became a wound, in how they cover crime, in how they treat the families of victims, in what they believe their justice system is actually capable of. The wound never really closed. If you have a theory, drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, cases the world moved on from before anyone found the answer, subscribe.